Hi, everyone. Welcome to our first podcast with Dr. Blair. This is a quick introduction to the endocannabinoid system and its profound benefits. First, I'd like to introduce Dr. Blair. He is a West Point graduate. He got his medical degree from the University of Miami. He is the director of Pro Health Advisor, and he was a U.S. Army doc. I hear feedback all the time from his patients and from his consulting sessions. And not only is he a wealth of information, but he has a lot to share, and he's a pioneer in the field of CBD and the endocannabinoid system. Dr. Blair, hi.
Good morning, Christy. It's so great to be with you. And I really am excited about the opportunity to talk with other providers about what we're doing and what we're finding with cannabidiol and exploring that in a wide range of conditions. Just a little bit about myself. I spent 30 years in the Army, and then I'm 40 years in medicine thus far, and I hope many more. And I'm so excited because the cannabidiol brings a dimension to medical care that I had never dreamed would be possible. And so I want to share that with the other providers and other people everywhere. I can't downplay my enthusiasm and my passion about this substance. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you, Christy, here today.
Oh my gosh, Dr. Blair, I feel the same way. And I want to encourage all of the health providers and medical providers that are listening to this and understand your role, that you're on the front lines of explaining and understanding this profound system and molecule. So please, participate with us. Send us your questions. This is for you. This is for your patients and your clients. And we just want this to grow. So let us know what you want to hear, and we're going to be happy to talk about it. Dr. Blair, since this is our first podcast, do you think it would be appropriate to introduce what the endocannabinoid system is?
Well, I think that's a great place to start because it's the basis for everything that we're doing and how cannabidiol works.
Great. Well, I've told you over and over again, I don't know how I didn't know about this system, and it's so profound. Would you mind elaborating on it?
Well, sure. The endocannabinoid system is relatively new to our medical dimension. It's stood in the shadows, and we were really unaware of its profound extension within our body. One of the exciting things is for the cannabinoid system is that it regulates so much of the other systems that are involved with it. So we're talking about sleep, we're talking about energy, we're talking about metabolism, and a wide range of other conditions. And in fact, we're continuing to explore that. There are thousands of articles about the endocannabinoid system and its dimensions. And for instance, today I noticed that there were 7 articles alone that came through about cannabidiol over this last week. So the research is exploding in terms of the amount of material that's out there, and we're just learning to define it.
Wow. So the endocannabinoid system controls or regulates or modulates. How would you explain that when it comes to the whole body? Does it control just the neurological system, just the immune system? How does it put the whole body together as a whole?
Well, I think one of the cutest ways it's been described as a promiscuous molecule and a promiscuous system. It seems to be involved in so much of the body and all these different systems, and it seems like repeatedly we're finding connections everywhere. I think the main point for understanding the endocannabinoid system is that it's a regulator of all the other systems. It's a fine-tuning mechanism and the master controller for making a lot of the things that we have and the functions that we have, or, from the brain and to the gastrointestinal tract, work properly. And the caveat is that when it's not working properly, it probably ends up in some diseases, and we're seeing good evidence for that now.
I want to get into that very, very much so. Can we break down the two main compartments of the endocannabinoid system, also CB1 and CB2?
Sure. Let's talk about that. So, what does the endocannabinoid system consist of? Mainly, it consists of active molecules that are endocannabinoids, a lot like the hormones that we have that circulate through our body, and then receptors that are located throughout the body. Now, classically, we've said these receptors are located in the brain and the nerve tissue, and that and the other types of receptors of the same system are located in other parts of the body. But what we're actually seeing from the research and that's developing is that there is a blending of both those areas. And so we're finding that the CB1 receptors as well as the CB2 are in a number of different areas, and to try to over-define it really doesn't serve any purpose. And then the other thing is to say, well, is it up or down? How does it work? And being sort of locked into that particular receptor and the action, I don't think that that's a good approach, because what I've seen with modulation, we're really talking about increasing the amount or decreasing the amount, or the effects of those particular receptors. So it really is a fine-tuning mechanism. But Christy, we've left out some important elements of the endocannabinoid system, and those are the enzymes that are involved with either the creation of the endocannabinoids or their degradation, so that they're distributed throughout the body. In addition, there's clear signs that there are other transporter molecules that are also part of this. And what I mean by transporter molecules is, how do you get the cannabinoids or the endocannabinoids to the different parts of the cell? Because we're seeing receptors and we're seeing action for the cannabinoids in other areas inside the cell. For instance, the nucleus, and changing the DNA and the epigenetics, as well as mitochondria, making profound changes in the metabolism by influencing the mitochondria, as well as the Golgi apparatus and the endoplasmic reticulum. All of these functions are going on. So how do these signals get there? And one of the ways may be through these transport molecules. So it's an exciting time and a wide range. And one other thing I want to mention, Christy, is that we really focus on the CB1 and the CB2 receptors. Those are classically what we see, but there's a bunch of other ones, and we have yet to discover all of them. There is the transient receptor protein vanilloid that is out there, and really odd name and construction, but it's very active in a number of different diseases, as well as the GRP55, which is another active receptor. And these kinds of receptors are involved with pain and malignancy and cancers, as well as a number of other disorders. So the range of the endocannabinoid system is quite large. And some of the substances that we're using actually, in that idea of a promiscuous molecule, actually lend themselves to other mechanisms that are going on within the body, and sort of spreading over to these other systems and influencing other systems at the same time. And what's happening here is, as a regulatory system, it's balancing the body. It's balancing the body, and when it's healthy, you have a homeostasis. You have a balanced, functioning organism, but it gets out of balance for one reason or another, whether it's toxins or adverse living conditions or even psychological effects that we are impacted with. Those kinds of things can disrupt the system and lead to disease and manifestations of conditions or syndromes.
I like how you explained, too, that CBD, how it works with these receptors and these enzymes and these neurotransmitters as an adaptogen. Because sometimes if people go in and dig in with their own research, they'll get confused. And I was certainly in this boat, and you helped me out with it. You hear that it does this, and then you hear that it does the opposite. So does CBD work as an adaptogen with the endocannabinoid system? Is that how? And then can you explain what heals and repairs those receptors too?
Well, that's a a number of questions all in one, and glad to address that. In terms of cannabidiol, so cannabidiol is actually a phytocannabinoid. It's coming from a plant, but it interacts with the endocannabinoid system as well as a number of other systems, and regulating these other systems as well, influencing them in different ways. So cannabidiol is the non-psychoactive portion that comes from cannabis, and typically that's coming from the hemp plant, but it also comes from the marijuana plant. Now, the difference here is that marijuana has THC, which is a psychoactive component, and the CBD doesn't have any psychoactive effects. It doesn't have any way that it influences or causes any a high or distortion of reality for you. So it's really the main component of medicinal marijuana, which is characteristically low THC marijuana and high CBD product. But the products that I'm really want to focus on is that from hemp, because this is available, it's legal, and it doesn't have any significant side effects. So, and then in terms of cannabidiol, and I think you had your question was, well, how does it work, or how does it influence these other systems?
Yes, and these receptors I know that you've explained in the detox seminar that we don't want to think of cannabidiol as snake oil. It's not a cure-all, but it's a huge missing link. And the role of omega-3s with these receptors too.
All right, let's get back to your earlier focus was on as an adaptogen. So the adaptogen is a concept that when you have a substance that works in multiple areas of the body to improve and restore health, and in some cases that's a matter of increasing the number of receptors or decreasing the amount of a substance or one of the cannabinoids. In fact, cannabidiol has a property of rebalancing the endocannabinoid system, so that if the anandamide and the natural endocannabinoids that are there are too low, then it tends to bring them up. And if there are too many receptors, it tends to regulate those receptors so that they decrease in the total numbers of receptors. And so what it's doing is restoring the endocannabinoid balance that is present between the agonists and the activators, as well as the receptors. And so when that's in balance, then that's going to restore health. But I mentioned before that the cannabidiol actually has some other properties that are quite fascinating in terms of the other receptors, as well as other activating other substances. So it makes the cannabidiol a really whole person sort of medication, affecting and improving the natural and the normal function of the entire body.
That is so profound. Would you like to give a few examples of some clinical deficiencies of the endocannabinoid system? You've mentioned some already, like cancer, but some of the case studies and what you're seeing as clinical deficiencies of the endocannabinoid system. How is that manifesting?
Right. The deviations in the endocannabinoid system seem to be associated with a number of different disease states, typically syndromes, where you have sort of a global body adversity that comes about. And a good example is those are migraines, fibromyalgia, and irritable bowel disease. Now, it turns out that all three of these conditions really overlap. And what I mean is that people with headaches also have bowel problems, and people with fibromyalgia also have brain fog and gut problems as well. So there's quite a bit of an overlap for these three conditions. And what's consistent in all of them is that there are deviations in terms of the number of endocannabinoids that are circulating, as well as the number of receptors. Now, sometimes that's up for one and down for the other, or the reverse. And that's true for cancer. There was a recent study that was recently released in 2016 that has shown for lung cancer that one type of lung cancer actually has high levels of the endocannabinoids with low levels of receptors, and in another type of lung cancer that the opposite is there, where you have high numbers of receptors but very low amounts of the endocannabinoids. So to focus on one direction is probably a bad idea because of the variations that happen in these different diseases, and you can get confused.
So would you suggest to our medical professionals and health providers to think of CBD as an adaptogen that supports either the high or low dysfunction of these receptors?
I think the best concept is to say and recognize that it's going to restore people to normal.
I love that.
If they restored to normal, then you really don't have to worry about whether is it going up or is it going down, and get away from trying to define that because it's going to be very difficult to establish that evidence and to see that in human studies. We already have a problem in the limited human studies that have been done with cannabidiol, and to try to make specifics and down to the receptors, the action, gets very confusing. Plus, it turns out that the cannabidiol as well as the endocannabinoids, when there are molecules associated with it at the same time frame, then that can modulate the actual effects of the cannabidiol. So I think one good example are the omega-3s. Now we've always, I didn't understand, why are omega-3s helpful? Why do they help in all conditions? There's so many different conditions that it's helpful for. Well, why do they do that? And the implication was that they were a polyunsaturated fat, and because of that, they were in that category, oh, this is a healthy fat. Well, that turns out that's not the case. What is true is that these are precursors for the endocannabinoids as well as helpful for building the receptors. And so what you have with the omega-3s is this is how the endocannabinoid system is powered. It's the fundamentals of the endocannabinoid system that have to be there in order for the phytocannabinoids or whatever therapies that you're using to restore them.
Good. That is critical. Thank you for that, because I'm sure most of our health and medical providers provide some sort of high quality omega-3 to their clients and their patients. If they don't, maybe they can ask you some good sources for that. Dr. Blair, before we wrap this up, because this is such a wealth of information, do you think that we could go over a quick case study?
Well, we can, but I'd like to make one other point, and that is that the other practitioners are using things that work already. So whether it's an osteopath or a chiropractor or nutrition therapy, these things work in the techniques they're using, as well as other systems like acupuncture or massage, even meditation. They work, but why do they work? Well, if you start looking into the science, you realize that that's really working through the endocannabinoid system. More and more evidence is coming up that these sorts of things will stimulate the endocannabinoid system. And so we're all working on the same team, whether it's cannabidiol or these other therapies, in terms of restoring the endocannabinoid system to balance and normalcy for these people who are suffering with so many different diseases.
It is so fascinating. This truly is one of the best scientific discoveries ever. Yourself, I've heard say this, and some other doctors, that the discovery of the endocannabinoid systems probably the most profound discovery in health so far to date. Would you agree with that?
Well, I don't know if we're so far to date, but certainly within the 21st century, it's on the top of my list.
Mine too. Dr. Blair, let's say everyone's listening to this and they go, all right, well, I have a lot of my patients have, let's take either headaches or chronic pain, for example. What is a good protocol for them to use? They have CBD in their office and their patients or their clients come and say, I have chronic headaches, and I've heard about the benefits of CBD. How would I use it?
Well, I think the start off with a sort of a standard dose, and getting people to start on it, and then watching to see what their effects are. So the typical dose for most of these problems and is starting at about 15 milligrams of CBD tincture twice a day. Now, from there, I recommend that the patients be observed very closely and make adjustments very rapidly. So after even the first day or the second day, you should look at making changes and increasing the dose. Now, because cannabidiol doesn't have any significant adverse effects or toxicity or drug interactions or coagulation effect, then it's really safe, very safe to use. And you don't need to worry about a lot of the adversity that you might see with other substances that you've been using thus far. So that means you can make rapid adjustments and get to a therapeutic level without waiting a long period of time. Now, typically with antidepressants, it takes even months in order to reach a therapeutic level. But with cannabidiol, there is almost an immediate effect that comes over people. So you have an improvement of mood and improvement of function that is very quick. So with that information and understanding that, then for providers, the best way to do that is to let's adjust rapidly to the patient gets benefit. And when they get benefit, then whatever that side benefit is, then you're going to have a confidence of the patient that this is working. It makes it reasonable in terms of, okay, I'm feeling the effects, and I know I paid some money for this, but I'm seeing the results right now. And then you can adjust and monitor the improvements of the patient over that period of time. Every patient is different in terms of what they need, in terms of the number of cannabidiol milligrams. And so it's a mistake to try to fix yourself on one particular dose. Find that person's level and find out what works for them and what's ideal for them.
That's so liberating. It almost becomes very intuitive, doesn't it? When the endocannabinoid system starts self-regulating and people can self-adjust and work with their health providers.
Without fear for significant adversity of any kind. So it becomes a food supplement and used as a food. I have to remind people, and I especially like to remind health providers, that this is much less a medicine than it is a food supplement or a vitamin. And if you put it in that kind of framework, then I think that helps a lot in terms of how to use it, when to use it, and understanding that every patient is going to respond differently.
Anything that they should be aware of if they're doing too much or too little?
Well, sometimes if a patient is using too much, they may feel some fatigue. And this is sort of the exhaustion type of thing that people feel rather than making you sleepy. In fact, on the contrary, it doesn't make people sleepy. And this is one of the paradoxes. It doesn't make people sleepy, but it helps their sleep. And the evidence shows that there's an improvement in stage 4 sleep with a decrease in stage, the REM sleep and the active dreaming phase. So that's really encouraging, but it's such a difference and it's such a contrast to what we think of as one-trick pony kind of drugs that just work on one receptor and have only one action.
Gosh, I am blown away by this molecule. I am always impressed with your information and your presence and the way that you present this. It's so approachable and it's so necessary. Is there anything else you'd like to contribute to our medical professionals about the endocannabinoid system that we haven't touched on, or a way that they could benefit from CBD just from this conversation? Because there'll be more to come.
Well, we've gotten a good start and laid a groundwork for it. I think there's a lot of detail that we can go into, and I'm sure that some of the providers are very interested in learning about the pharmacokinetics and then approaching different disease states and what is it really effective for. And then hopefully we'll talk about some of the side benefits that come along. So often we're talking about adverse side effects and toxicity of the different drugs with a long list. In fact, it usually encompasses a lot more of the commercials that we see on television than we
Yes.
see in terms of the benefits. But in this case, the side benefits will take a whole half hour or more, and the side effects can, it's just like, not even. Krista,
Better
it's been
everything.
delightful. It's been great to be with you here and be able to talk about my favorite subject.
Oh my gosh, it is mine too. And thank you, Dr. Blair. We welcome all your questions and comments from the medical professionals. And please know that Dr. Blair also takes on consulting clients too, if you have specific concerns that you want to address with him. And we will hear from you, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you so much, Dr. Blair.
Pleasure to be with you.
You too.